Hi, Iskander here with another lecture. So in this one, let's take a look at SWR. So what SWR allows us to do with Next.js is to dynamically fetch data while also utilizing the statically generated pages that Next.js allows us to do. So it's a pretty cool library to basically get real-time data, and it's going to be constantly fetching it and automatically updating our UI based on what's inside of our Shopify CMS system. So what we're going to be doing is fetching the inventory for a particular variant and actually kind of disabling the input field on our website. So let's go ahead and start by installing SWR. So let's go inside of the docs and we'll just copy the npm install. And then back inside of our code, let's open up the terminal. And I found out that there's a new shortcut for opening up the terminal. It's Command J. So it's pretty useful. The old one that I was using was pretty uncomfortable. So the new one is Command J. And let's go ahead and npm install SWR. And we're also going to need to install Axios. All right, perfect. Now, the way we're going to be doing it is by using the provided Next.js API folder here. So let's go inside of the API folder and we'll rename this available. So Next.js allows us to have this kind of mini server inside of our front-end application, which is pretty cool. Then like we don't need to spin up our own server. We can just use this API here. For now, let's go ahead and npm run dev first, just to see what we're working with. And inside of our code, we can go to localhost 3000. And now the project that we finished at the end of the course, we can see right here. And if we just go ahead and choose a product, we can see that everything is finished here. But what I went ahead and did was inside of the Shopify CMS, I went ahead and removed one of the quantities for one of the products or one of the variants. So go ahead and do this as well, just so we can do some testing. And hit save after you set the quantity to 0. The next thing that we're going to have to do is go into our app that we created for this course. So Shopify changed things around a little bit. You're going to have to go into this tab right here, develop apps. And let's open our Next.js connection. And inside of our connection app, let's go ahead down to the storefront API. And you're going to want to click this one, read inventory of products and variants. In the course, we didn't select it, so make sure that you have this selected and hit save. Now here's the problem, right? So back inside of our website, we know that this first variant here is actually sold out, but the customer doesn't know that and they can still check out. So this can be easily fixed with SWR. So back inside of our code now, let's go into available.js. And we have this boilerplate API route. So since the API routes are deployed separately from our whole application, we actually need to rebuild our API calls inside of this route here. So let's go ahead back inside of the libs folder and shopify.js. And we're going to go ahead and copy the domains. And inside of the available.js again, we can paste our environment variables. And let's just delete this comment right here. And for the function, let's change this to an async function. And we're just going to change this to send, or you can change it to available. It doesn't really matter. And inside of here, let's go ahead and destructure the ID that we're going to be passing in using the request. So we'll say const and then query and the ID, and that's going to be from the request. Perfect. So for the next one, we can actually just copy this whole Shopify data query that we created here. So make sure to go to the very bottom here and just copy the whole function. And we're going to go ahead and paste it into here. So we pretty much don't need to change anything inside of this function. And the next one that we're going to need to grab is the get product function. And it's just down here. So again, I like to click on this curly brace right here, just so I can see where it ends, so I don't copy the wrong thing. And then going all the way up, we can grab the get product. And just at the bottom here, let's go ahead and paste this in as well. And so we actually don't need all of this information. The only thing that we're going to need is the variants. So let's go ahead and remove this collection. And again, I'm just going to go to the bottom here and remove that. And then remove everything up here. Maybe I'll leave the ID. And then inside of the variants, what we want to leave, let's just copy all of this actually and remove it. And then here we'll just say ID and then available for sale. So the available for sale is going to return a Boolean, whether the variant is actually available or it's sold out. Perfect. So now we pasted all of these in. We need to go down. We'll create a new variable called product, and we're going to await the get product function that we just pulled in, and we're going to pass in the ID, and then we want to return a status of 200, and also res.json will return the products. Okay, perfect. So we just created that API really quickly. So I just saved it, but it seems like there's a small error here. We can't have an export inside of the API. So we copied that in as well by accident. So let's go ahead and remove this export since we're not really exporting anything. So now let's go ahead and test the API. The way we can do this is by going to localhost 3000 /API/available $ID, and we'll input the handle of the product. So let's go ahead and hit enter. And we can see that we get an object back with the ID, the variants, and then the ID for each variant, and also if it's available for sale or not. So for example, since we set this one to 0, it's now false. But if we go back to our product and we go to the product that we are on, and we change this to 1, for example, and then go back to our API call and refresh, and now available for sale is true. Okay, so we got the API working now. Let's go ahead and make the changes on our front end so that when the product becomes unavailable, the user will no longer be able to purchase it. So back inside of our code, let's navigate to our components, and we'll go into the product form. Now inside of the product form, let's go ahead and import use SWR from SWR and import Axios from Axios. So if we go back to the documentation for SWR, we can see that we need to set up the fetcher function. And since we're going to be using Axios, we need to set up an example one or a custom one. So let's go ahead and do that. Back inside of our code, let's create the fetcher. And the fetcher is going to grab the URL and the ID. And it's going to be an arrow function. And then we'll say axios.get. And what we're going to get is from the URL. And then let's go ahead and pass in some params. And for the params, it's going to be an object. And for the object, we're just going to pass in the ID, which is actually a handle, but it just kind of keeps it from being too complicated since we already have a handle variable that we're using. And then here, after the get request, we're going to do a .then. And this is going to be an arrow function as well. And actually, we need to pass in the response here. And the response is going to be response.data. Okay, perfect. And actually a little change here. Let's remove the curly braces since we want it to be returned right away. And we'll just keep it neat like this. Now that we set up our fetcher function, let's go inside of our product form function. So now inside of our product form function, let's go ahead and use the use SWR hook. So let's say const, and from the object, will the product inventory. and that's going to be equals to use SWR, and we'll open the braces. And inside of here, we're going to pass in an array, and the array is going to contain the link for our API, which is going to be /API/available. And the next variable will be product.handle, which is going to be the ID that we're passing into our API. Now for the next variable, we're going to pass in the URL and ID, and then we're going to use the fetcher function, and that's going to grab the URL and ID inside of it. And we'll also add this optional variable, which is error.retry count, and we want it to retry 3 times if it doesn't work the first time. Perfect. So now we actually can start using this product inventory variable. So let's go ahead and console log it. Product inventory, and let me just make this smaller a little bit. So we go back inside of our product page. It says undefined, and this is actually because we use curly braces here. So let's go ahead and change those to just round braces. Now let's go ahead and save this and see if that fixes it. All right, perfect. So now we actually get the data from our API, and we can see here that it says available for sale equals true. So let's go ahead back and change this to 0 again. We can see that now it says available for sale to be false. Okay, perfect. So now we can actually start using this variable that we fetched. So let's go back inside of our product form, and we can go ahead and remove this console log. And also what we can do is we can create a new state to actually track if that variant is available or it's not. So just underneath where we used the SWR, let's go ahead and create our available and then set available use state, and we'll set it to true by default. Create a use effect where we're going to update our available state. So let's go ahead and use the use effect hook. And it's going to be an arrow function inside of here, and it's going to have some dependencies. Now inside of here, let's go ahead and check if product inventory exists, because as you saw by default, at the very beginning, it always displays as undefined. So we need to make sure that we have grabbed the data from our API. And now inside of here, we can create a new variable called check available. And check available is going to check the product inventory. And then if product inventory does exist, we will access the variants.edges, and we're going to filter through this, and we'll say item equals item.node.id if that equals select variant.id. So let's go ahead and create another if statement, and we'll say check available, and we'll grab the first one, and we'll say .node.available for sale, available for sale. And where am I getting this data from is from this array over here. So we can see here that we want to grab the variable that's available for sale. So we're basically checking if it exists in the inventory. And based on this, we can set available to be true, or else we'll set it to available to be false. Okay, perfect. And now for the dependencies, we're going to make sure that we update the state whenever the product inventory changes, and also when selected variant changes. So what we can do now is update the button so that whenever the product is not available for sale, we want to basically remove the functionality from the button so that the customer isn't able to add to the cart. So what we can do here is we can add some curly braces and we can say available. And if it is available, let's go ahead and display this button over here. And if it's not available, we're going to display a different button. So let's just go ahead and copy this. And from this button, let's remove the add to cart functionality. And also we'll make sure that to remove the background color, and also let's remove the hover effect. And we'll also say that we want the cursor to be not allowed. And what we'll say here is sold out. Okay, perfect. So let's hit save and see what we have in our store. All right, awesome. So right away, what's happened is this button got deactivated. And then if I change it to here for an item that is available, then it goes back to properly allowing the customer to check out. So right now, let's go ahead and test if this works on a live setting. So basically right now it's sold out. But if we go, let's just refresh this just to make sure that it doesn't break. All right, so it says sold out, and let's go ahead back inside of our product and we'll change this inventory to 1. We'll wait for it to save, and then it might take a few seconds for it to actually hit our API. So if we go back now, the button got changed to add to cart, and it works properly, and we can add to cart now and remove from the cart. And if we go ahead and change this to 0 again, and product saved, and if we go back, there we go. So it changed the button to sold out. Perfect. So just like that, we were able to implement SWR for dynamic data fetching right onto our static website. And you can use this functionality for a lot of other things on the website as well that you might want to, dynamically change depending if something happens on the CMS.